I have two stories from my late grandpa that took place in rural Yugoslavia, present-day Serbia, in the mid-40s and the 1950s. The first one is about a being or thing called Drekovac, or Drikovac, which literally means the one who screams. Folklore says it's the spirit of a dead child that screams and can latch on to travelers and shepherds. My granddad was a young man when he had an encounter with this being. Back then, people would travel by foot from village to village at night. This being the 50s, there was no lighting whatsoever on these paths between villages. My granddad recalls returning home to his own village after a social get-together in another village tens of kilometers away. It was completely dark, and he remembers hearing a loud screaming sound, like that of a fox or a dog. Sounds like these were normal, of course, but this time he felt something jump on his back, like a heavy being that made him hunch over because of its weight. He said he was too terrified to even fight it, and just kept walking and walking until he eventually came closer to a lit village, when it just jumped off and left. I remember asking him on multiple occasions if he's sure this was a real physical thing, or just his mind playing tricks on him because of fear and the folklore stories. He was always completely convinced this was a being that really latched onto his back and did not let go for a long period. He always told me this story like it was a thing that could, and did, happen to people that traveled at night. He never seemed traumatized about it. It was just part of life back then. The second story is creepier to me because it doesn't have a folklore background. This was when my granddad was still a child. He used to sleep in one bed with his kid brother and his mother. This was in a one-room cabin-like house. One night he woke up in the middle of the night and saw a pale-faced woman dressed in all black next to their bed. Completely terrified, he tried to wake his mother up, but she brushed him off and did not fully wake, probably tired from rural 1940s life. The cloaked woman took his kid brother from the bed, exited the house, and disappeared in the woods by the house. Eventually, my granddad managed to wake his mother. She noticed her younger son was missing and alarmed the other villagers. A group of them, including my granddad, ran into the woods to look for the woman and his brother. Granddad recalls it being a long search until dawn started to come. He said, "We did not find him until we heard the first roosters," meaning they found him when the sun was coming up. When they found his brother in the woods, he was okay, not badly hurt, but he had scratches all over his upper body. My grandpa always had a certain respect for the darkness. One night, I was trying to bring their old dog, Teddy, inside. It was probably around 7 p.m., just when it was starting to get dark, a normal late summer evening. But he didn't want me going outside then. He'd always say, "After 6 p.m., we don't leave the house alone, and once it gets dark, we don't leave at all." I used to think he just said that because there were animals out there or something. Later, I asked him why we couldn't go outside, and my grandma said, "You don't talk about that or it brings bad luck." Grandpa just said there were folks around here who went out and never came back, but when I asked why, he'd changed the subject. It wasn't until I got older and started helping with hunting and woodcutting, and the woods became more a part of my everyday life, that he started opening up a little more. He told me the danger wasn't the woods themselves, but the things that watch you and want you to stay. Most of them won't harm you, but they make sure you get lost. Back then, I thought it was hard to believe, well, mostly hard to believe, and I still do to some extent. But I figured if an 80-year-old man is saying this stuff, it can't all be made up. A few months later, I asked again, and he said, "Boy, sometimes it's better not to know everything, but you want to know, don't ya?" And that's when he started telling me a few stories. He mentioned there was a family in the 20s that had immigrated from Belgium and didn't follow the rules. He said they'd go out at night, unprotected, just by themselves, and some of them didn't come back. He told me a bunch of stories about people who went into the woods and never returned. He also said you should never whistle in the woods. If you do, everything goes quiet, no animal sounds, nothing. When that happens, you got yourself a problem. You'll feel watched, get chills, and you'll start thinking there's something behind every tree. He said when you whistle, you wake up things in the woods that should have stayed asleep, and if they hear it, they'll wait for you. Another rule he had was no music. No playing music or even listening to it while working or hunting. Not cause of the animals or anything, but the forest has its own rules. Break those, and you won't make it back home easy. He said too much artificial noise, whether it's whistling, music, chainsaws, or motors, can invite these things to come after you, and they get mad. They'll stalk you, and the noise just makes them angrier. Another story, there's these old abandoned cabins that people avoid. The cabins are empty, but something waits there. If you walk by, you'll start hearing things, sometimes a footstep, sometimes a whisper, but you won't see nothing. He said that's when you walk into a trap, 'cause the woods want something from you. My grandparents just didn't like talking about all that too much, so there's still some questions I'll probably never get answers to. Those things Grandpa talked about, they're still a mystery to me too. I think he meant some kind of forest spirits or demons, something like that, but I never really got to ask him straight. The creepiest ones were always the stories they'd actually lived through, not the ones passed down from one generation to the next. Like the barefoot tracks in the woods. Who the hell runs barefoot out there? I've seen some myself once, and Grandpa even had a whole bunch of photos of them. He also told me about those braided symbols he'd seen a few times. I only ever saw one myself. They also knew the kind of stories pretty much everybody in WV's heard, like don't whistle in the woods, and them rider ghosts, the ones that snatch folks up and drag them into the forest if you wander too far from home at night. Grandpa really believed in that stuff, and I wonder why. My grandma was a quarter native, and she always said the natives had an even stronger sense about weird things in the woods and up in the Appalachians, like Sasquatch or these human-like beings. But even my grandparents, like I mentioned before, didn't truly believe in that. The only real things to them were those things, those forest spirits Grandpa used to talk about. I think it was the not knowing, the things they just couldn't explain, that really scared him. But for me, I still wonder what's really behind all them stories. I mean, an 80-year-old man don't just make up stuff like that to mess with his grandkids, right? And it ain't just him. There's plenty of folks in WV talking about the same kind of things. Those weird braided symbols and them footprints. They're there, they're real somehow. Or maybe someone's playing tricks, but honestly, I don't think so. And that's the creepy part, when you just don't got no explanation for it. This didn't happen in the backwoods, but it's creepy and my grandma told it to me. My grandparents were retired and lived in southern Idaho, just south of Pocatello, out in the farmland on a couple acres of land that had milk cows and horses next door and whooping cranes down in the river bottoms. The only trees were in an old apple orchard. The I-15 freeway ran through there, but didn't get a lot of traffic. There are old lava fields with huge black boulders of lava rock, very sharp stuff. When they cleared the lava rock for the freeway, they left some big black sharp boulders in the meridian between the two freeway roads. Grandma warned me to be careful when I drive through there, because if I ever hit those sharp rocks in a car crash, I'm not likely to survive the lava rocks shredding everything. Okay, I'm always careful and don't run off roads. This is before cell phone distractions were a driving hazard. Yes, I'm old. We've had problems with people crashing when no one is around, just them driving by themselves. No witnesses. Not many survive. One guy did survive, and he said he was so surprised to see that Indian, Native American, on horseback in full feathered headdress standing in the meridian that he swerved and crashed. Grandma gave me a stern look. A guy wearing a costume? Nope, ghost. That's something. Revenge from beyond the grave. Remember to not swerve for the ghosts. Story break. This story is from my very religious grandmother and has since become somewhat of a legend in our family at this point. Decades ago, she and my grandfather were living in the woods of Northern California on a secluded ranch house. One particular night, she was awoken suddenly by my grandfather, who was muttering something under his breath. As she recalled, he was seated upright in bed next to her and staring ahead unwaveringly, calmly repeating, "I rebuke you in the name of Jesus Christ." She turned to see who he was speaking to, and to her shock and utter surprise instead saw a thick, green cloud of smoke hovering just beyond the foot of her bed. And not like an airy mist, but rather a condensed, undulating storm cloud. Obviously startled by this sight, she said my grandfather calmly said, "It's okay, dear, I'm taking care of it. Go back to sleep." And as far as she recalls, the cloud gradually dissipated, and they both eventually slept soundly the rest of the night, despite the disturbance. What I always found interesting about this story, despite my grandparents' religious proclivities, is that my grandmother always said that neither of them were scared, nor did the event necessarily feel real or like a dream. Nevertheless, both of them experienced it and remembered it vividly until their passing.